visiting all the points on the map and meeting hundreds of people along the way. I'm going to take you on a journey through 5 major areas of life in modern China: the political system, the economy, science and innovation, ecology, and people's livelihood. Let's discover a China on the map. Over the 25 years I've spent in China, I've witnessed the national economy thrive. At the same time, I've also seen a big increase in the gap between the rich, and especially the super rich, and the poor, and urban and rural areas, as well as inadequate provision of safeguards for vulnerable groups, and a troubling employment market. These are obvious issues that China must address. Is that gap between rich and poor solvable? Is it possible to share the fruits of development so that everyone can benefit from what the government calls common prosperity? There are nearly 600 million farmers in China, accounting for more than 40% of China's population. Whether such a large group can live a good life without moving to the city is an important indicator of whether common prosperity is achievable. Since the 1970s, China claims to have lifted around 770 million people out of poverty. In the 8 years up to 2020, the final 100 million poor officially exited the extreme poverty category. To find out what's happening to Chinese farmers, I came to Baiyan village in western China's Guizhou province. Guizhou used to have the largest percentage of poor people in the country. +20 years ago, I came to Guizhou. I remember rice terraces, the wooden houses on stilts, and the local Miao ethnic dress. At first glance, not much has changed, but the village is now dotted with fancy guest houses.
就花姐到我们这边来，
谢谢你了，全是我的吗？这个
全部都是你的。
太好了，
你看美不美？
美。啊，这里也可以住宿。
Some local customs have been adapted for visitors to join in. Li Nai Song took me for a spot of rice terrace fishing, where my natural ability shone. They told me we ate the fish we caught for dinner. Li Nai Song was born in Baiyan, but left for a while to work in Shanghai and Wuxi, on China's east coast. Young people have traditionally headed to the cities to find better jobs and escape local poverty. Only the elderly and children stayed behind. Baiyan village became what is referred to as a hollow village. With extreme poverty now officially at an end, the government says that the next stage in local development is something called rural revitalization. But what is that exactly? How should hollow villages develop?
你们是什么专业的？
酒店管理。
Okay.
Today, these students are visiting the guest houses as part of what's called a social practice or work experience activity. They're received by the young village head, Tang Wende. Tang, who was born in the village, also wanted to seek opportunities in the big city after graduating from university. He worked in Shanghai for 5 years.
我们钱东南村民主职业学院做一个实践创作基地那么以后的学生们随时都可以来这边。
In 2013, just as China was launching its targeted poverty alleviation strategy, Tang returned to his hometown, hoping to play his part. He's worked his way up from tourist guide to village head.
那时候我才25岁，所以我觉得这么年轻来做一个村长，既然给我这样的一个机会和平台，那我要在3年时间内我要来和父老乡亲们一起整村推进、整村发展、产业振兴。 嗨，老铁们，大家好！今天啊，我在雷公沙沙顶，
欢迎大家也来到白岩木鱼街民宿。
看，对面的今天准备抓鱼了。
Bayan Village started developing guest house projects to help drive tourism in the area. But as Tung explained, things didn't work out well at the beginning.
我们开发过程其实也面临很多困难，像我们爱妻这里啊，征地也是一个问题。现在我们在资金上面我们还不够，所以呢，我们体量还不够大。
With tourism picking up in Bayan, the foundation is now working with a new partner in the village, telecom giant Samsung Group, making this a partnership between government, enterprise and foundation. According to the foundation, even in the midst of the pandemic in 2020, the village's revenue increased by 40% from the previous year, and villagers' incomes continue to grow.
"只有过节了，大家在一起很愉快的欢歌善舞，所以呢，就感觉到这个我们的乡村应该是这样子的啊，所以满满的幸福感和获得感。
In 2020, the Beautiful Village Guesthouse project, in which Bayan Village is included, was selected by the UN as a sustainable development success story. Is the development of Bayan Village an exception or a microcosm of China's rural revitalization? Guest houses might work here, but would it work if everywhere had them?
我们是从2000年左右开始尝试，实际上我们走了很多弯路，也是踩了很多坑，最终走出了这样一条乡村可持续发展的路。这个路我归纳就几条：第一，必须是以合作社为基础，这样把村里的资源整合起来，把村民团结起来；第二个，必须是以产业为方向；第三，必须要发挥本村能人的作用；第四个，在这个基础上，再把外部的资源对接进来。那么这样的做法，它是有可能成功的。
There's something very appealing about these guest houses up on the mountain, and for many of the people I met, they have brought new life to the village. But I see some potential downsides too.
夏天的生意还可以，冬天的门还少一点。有时候那些客人到我们这里来住一个星期，回去了我差不多哭了，有感情是吧？
These problems are not unique to this particular village on this particular mountain in Guizhou, but extend over tens of thousands of rural communities all over China.
Relative poverty largely is in rural areas. That's a massive task, a massive multi-generational, multi-decade task, but it is a priority.
But as rural development speeds up, urbanization continues apace, raising another question for China. Are the basic interests of urban migrants, another large group in China, well protected? The degree and speed of urbanization in China makes it the exception rather than the rule globally. I come from the UK, which in the 19th century was the first country in the world to experience rapid urbanization as the Industrial Revolution kicked off. How we treat and provide basic social security for migrant workers, known as the floating population, is a measure of urban governance, especially for megacities like Shanghai. Shanghai has the largest floating population in China, at close to 10 million. Among them are talented young people who have just started their careers and desire to settle here permanently, as well as frontline workers providing public services, including couriers, sanitation workers, and housekeepers. Though its benefits are clear, industrialization often comes at the expense of certain communities. The question for the big Chinese cities is whether it's possible to develop enough affordable housing to keep essential workers and the young from living further and further away. Zhang Lei, a 32-year-old sanitation worker, is from Qinhuangdao in northern China's Hebei province.
上了3年大学，第4年因为自己一些原因，还有家里面一些比较困难吧，当时想的是不想拖累家里了，就自己提前出来去闯。
For several years, he worked temporary jobs before arriving alone in Shanghai 2 years ago to take up a job cleaning roads in the North Bund area of downtown Shanghai. I made an appointment with Zhang to meet in the old town near his work. He took me to see his co-worker, Yu Ping, whose apartment is very similar to where Zhang used to live.
玉萍，在家吧？在，好久不见。
哎，你好，你好。啊，这是你住的地方是吗？
啊，对。
几个人呢
2个。
你跟你
夫妻。
啊，这样的。
像我这个房子阳光都没有了。
就是一个小的窗子是吧？这样。
没有阳光了。
然后价格呢？这里贵吗？还是？
肯定贵啊！目前2500，我一个人的工资已经就下去一半了，真的是没有办法的。
Zhang Lei faced the same predicament when he first came to Shanghai. He might have been working as, in some senses, an urban beautician, but his living conditions were far from beautiful. In early 2021, he learned that his cleaning company had applied for some public rental houses. They're located near the area he cleans every day and meant for urban frontline workers like him. Workers here can choose a shared room or a family room based on their needs. Zhang filled in the application, and less than 2 months later, he moved into his new home.
把灯打开了。
不错。那你这里是2个人是吧？
对，这里是我，这里是另外一个。
OK。这里是离地铁很近是吧？
对，左边和右边都有地铁站。
Although Zhang Lei's new home isn't big, it is clean and tidy, and seems well maintained. The next morning, he invited me to join him at work.
如果有的话要挑出来。
你是不是对你这份工作呢也有一种
荣誉感？有啊，因为它现在的环卫整个行业，它不像是之前的形象就是像是很脏、很累、很差，但是现在我们也是各种先进的作业工具也在使用，越来越好。在我们环卫人的眼里面嘛，我们觉得就很光荣。
是。
Sanitation work might not be many people's dream job. I was lucky enough to join Zhang on a sunny day. I can only imagine what it's like in the cold and rain. But without workers like Zhang, cities would fall apart. If housing prices are kept low enough and living conditions are decent, there is a chance that he'll choose to stay. The building Zhang Lei lives in used to be a budget hotel. After renovation by the government, it became a public rental building for service personnel. There are 122 apartments and 166 beds, and rent is between 60 and 70% of the market price. By 2020, Shanghai claimed 130,000 affordable rental apartments on its books for a total investment of over 20 billion yuan. The ambitious aim is to bring this to 600,000 apartments by 2025. From 2021 to 2025, the plan is for affordable rental housing to account for about 45% of the total new housing in first-tier cities like Guangzhou and Shenzhen, and no less than 40% in Beijing. Dr. Martin White, Professor of International Studies and Sociology at Harvard University, is an expert in Chinese social issues. He has conducted extensive fieldwork examining China's social problems over a span of 40 years.
The pattern of very rapid urbanization in China has been very impressive, but it also has this fundamental problem. There has to be a basic assumption that it is the government's responsibility, including local governments in cities, to provide for the needs of their entire population, not just urban Hukou population.
That floating population doesn't just need a place to live, it also needs a job. And as we've seen over the past few years, in the face of a global pandemic, employment models are changing. Can government policies keep pace? I was born at a time in England when stable lifetime employment was still the norm. But for many people that has changed, and this is becoming more and more evident in China too. China's flourishing digital economy is gradually upsetting traditional forms of employment too. Large groups such as drivers for online ride-hailing services, delivery riders, and online streamers have emerged. There are now around 200 million so-called flexible workers in the country, and the number is still growing. Ming, now 33, has over a decade's experience in the beauty industry. She was once a cosmetician and the owner of a beauty salon. But to take care of her family, she now wants more free time and has switched to working as an online beautician, taking bookings through a well-known app.
19年那个时候嘛，然后女儿的话又是4年级，其实她慢慢会有一点自己的想法，叛逆的心理，就是陪她的时间也不多嘛。在后面了解一下，就是说这个平台上班的时间呀，然后包括怎么工作呀，我觉得还是蛮适合我的。
How do online beauticians work?
Hello， 来啦，
姐，你好，你好。
哎，你好。
啊，你好，
宋小姐，你好，你好。
你好，你好，
阿 Sir，
阿 Sir， 你好。
来，你好。阿敏经常来吗？
我1个月的话大概2到3次，比如说我休息的时候啊，我会找他过来做个脸。
那我们现在准备开始喽。
好的。
Ming is one of over 70,000 technicians covering 13 cities including Beijing, Shanghai and Guangzhou currently on the platform. And there are plans to enter more second and third tier cities soon.
我们现在谈的更多的零工是指新时代这种以互联网经济为基础的这种雇主，经过那些平台来自由匹配的，基本上是按项目或者说按时间来复酬的这种经济形态。我们国家的特点是说，规模大，发展这个快。
In contrast to Ming, who relies on a big platform to work flexibly, Cai Jiajia represents a large group of mainly young people in China who operate their own media or video channels via the internet. "26-year-old Cai comes from Wenzhou City in southern China's Zhejiang province. She graduated from university with a performance arts major in 2016. 3 years ago, she resigned from her 9-to-5 online customer service job and came to Kunshan, Suzhou, to form a band with friends. Against stiff local competition, Cai has started live streaming her music.
Yeah.
准备好了吗 ？Hello， 今天我们的这个直播间迎来了一位非常非常重要的一位嘉宾啊，欢迎我们的 Arthur， 耶！不灵不灵不灵不灵不灵 ，Are you ready?
I'm ready.
My first ever live streaming event. We didn't have many viewers, probably a good thing, but Cai and her bandmate made it fun, and they're clearly having a good time. And over time, as the audience builds and clicks accumulate, they can generate income from the platform, in theory at least.
我们直播间好没有接。像我们做这一行的也不太稳定，就可能今天他们生意好了啊，可能请得起歌手，那可能比较差一些的时候就会觉得不用歌手。顾虑方面肯定也有，社会保障这方面，因为只要是朝9晚5固定工作的人都会有社保这个问题，有这些保障对你来说，你自己心里是比较踏实的。
Cai Jiajia's concern is typical. Traditionally, flexible or freelance workers had no right to employment injury insurance, and if they moved to some first-tier cities, they weren't able to participate in local pension funds, medical insurance, and other social security systems. For hypermobile gig workers, this was far from ideal or fair.
未来我觉得真正的这个好的一个改革方向，肯定要都统筹化，随着他们工作机会、工作收入的这种变化，给他们一些选择。包括商业保险现在也在尝试，这样的话就是说我们建立一个多元的、多层次的保障体系。
But Cai Jiajia has recently learned that following a policy change, non-locally registered flexible workers like her can apply to take part in Social Security if they've paid basic pension insurance for 10 years in the province they're now living in. The authorities are attempting to balance competing interests here, trying to integrate new styles of employment into a system that has traditionally focused on classical work systems. The challenge is to find a way to bring new flexible working patterns under the same umbrella without undermining the upsides of its flexibility. Can China share the benefits of its rapid development equitably? In Bayan village, traditional dwellings are being converted into stylish guest houses with the aim of bringing city money in to revitalize rural communities. On the streets of Shanghai, frontline workers are taking advantage of affordable housing policies intended to improve living conditions and keep the city's essential services going. And for new workers of the gig economy, the prospect of being able to join the social security system means less worry about old age, poverty, and illness. We live in an age of tremendous and rapid change that seems to promise so much, but sometimes leaves us vulnerable. Time will tell whether the models China is creating and adapting might prove good starting points for a wider world in flux.
In order for China to really become a rich, they have to use the talents of their entire population, not just the urban population mostly.
You need to maintain the equality. Because started with Adam Smith, the first issue is about moral.
The China model was not to supplement people's incomes. The China model was to make it more possible for the place to be self-sustaining.
Equal opportunity, but then when the results are unequal, to take care of the most vulnerable and the most needy.
So I regard common prosperity to be a very welcome development because it marks the end of the rush to growth. It's not about words, it's about action and results.